So FBI Director Kash Patel went on to Real America's Voice, and he is definitely sitting in very hot water, folks, after the revelation in Congress to cover up the Epstein files. This is a guy who wrote a book called Government Gangsters. This is a guy who campaigned, same with Dan Bongino, same with a lot of the Trump administration, that, they were going to go after the deep state. They were going to challenge the administration. They were going to be the most transparent government in American history. And let it be known that that is not the case, because once you're in the club, once you're in the cult, you are now a victim of it. You are now part of that club. You are now part of that. We saw that with AOC when it came to the Democrats. We saw that with the Squad. And of course, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and the rest of the MAGA cult are no different. There are some outsiders within the podcast universe that are willing to call out the administration and even people like Kash Patel, but there's still a lot of people that don't. So here's Kash Patel, as Hotspot pointed out. So Kash Patel went on to this podcast show that apparently is taking place in a giant ballroom. I mean, look at that. Look how massive those desks are. For me, I do it in the corner of a basement in my house. Most people do podcasts in their garage. Most people have a tiny office space where they do a podcast. This looks like they rented out the plaza, for God's sakes. Hauling these two massive desks to have this nice background, just to have on Kash Patel. Even Joe Rogan, who has the #1 successful podcast, would not go this length. But anything for Real America's Voice, apparently. So Kash Patel lashes out at what he calls online conspiracy theorists for questioning the official FBI narrative surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So he's trying to diminish any further investigation on the Charlie Kirk assassination. They say they got him when it came to Tyler Robinson. They captured him. They got the text messages, even though it was a complete hoax. We know how stupid and foolish it sounded. We know that from the beginning it was going to be very suspicious. Again, this is the FBI that's constantly lied to us before, so why was this going to be any different? Kash Patel is no different than any other FBI administrator. And here he is, after everything that this man campaigned on. Again, he wrote a book about deep state and government gangsters. Now he's become one. He's become a government gangster, covering up the assassination of Charlie Kirk and trying to dispute actual Americans, podcasters, individuals that want answers. Take a look.
I think that the militant trans issue really became familiar to the American people last month when Charlie Kirk was killed. I mean, you guys at breakneck speed found this guy, you identified him, you profiled the type of person that he would be.
First of all, they didn't find the guy. Tyler Robinson's father brought him in. He confessed to his father. His father was the one that found him. The FBI had no idea. The FBI had no idea who was at fault here. It was the dad that supposedly confessed up to the police after his son supposedly confessed to him. But Tyler Robinson isn't confessing to the FBI. So none of this actually makes sense. When you look at the breakdown of what the FBI is telling us, what the official narrative is, again, don't trust the FBI's official narrative because they've lied to us in the past numerous times, so why is this any different? When you look at the official narrative that they brought out, there are so many flaws, there are so many plot holes, there's so much obvious just misinformation, just absolute carelessness. They're covering up the crime scene in Utah Valley. They're not, interviewing the campus. They're not going after CCTV footage. They're only showing you parts of clips of Tyler Robinson supposedly going onto the roof and then jumping off with the supposed rifle that got assembled, disassembled. It's so crazy. And then they found that rifle put together next to a home that was owned by Palantir. Like, there's so many things wrong with the official story. And even with this, oh, you caught the guy. No, you didn't. Tyler Robinson apparently confessed to his father, and his father told the FBI. That's what happened. The father did it. Not you.
And that's incredible. Is there more evidence that you guys can offer to people, maybe video from that roof? Do you expect that there will be more to be released?
I think the best thing we can do for Charlie, especially me as FBI director and our team, is to prosecute this case in the courts of law, where it is, in Utah, in the state of court of law. And what we're going to do is what we've...
So basically what he's saying is the best thing we can do for Charlie Kirk is to accuse this patsy to the full extent of the law and for everyone to shut the hell up. Does that sound like what Charlie Kirk would have said? Does that sound like what Charlie Kirk's legacy is about? Hey, we need people to shut the hell up. We're going to go after people. We're going to silence their speech, which you know Charlie Kirk was totally against that. He was for freedom of speech, but Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, the rest of these scumbags are trying to use that legacy of Charlie Kirk to try to assemble their own censorship police to rain down on people. And now they're trying to use it on this. They're trying to tell people to shut the hell up. We're going to prosecute this kid that we know, you know, is just completely backwards, that we have no idea that this guy's committed. We have no evidence to back these claims. But we're going to just prosecute this kid to shut the hell up, to get people back into line, and no further questions. Just like we're not going to have any further questions about looking into the crime scene. They've already disassembled. They're already covering up and paving over where the assassination occurred. They're not looking into George Zinn, who was the first guy that they cracked down, the first guy with his pants unbuckled, and he said, I did it, I did it. They're not accusing him. They're not going investigating him, a guy who apparently was at the 9/11 site when the Twin Towers came down, and at the Boston Marathon. You're not suspicious about that? No one has questions about that? Again, this is a scumbag. Kash Patel is a lying scumbag. This is a guy who obviously knows better. He campaigned about government secrets, FBI, how they lied to you. Now he's part of the club. Oh, I can lie to you now because it works in my favor. I get a comfy position. So, of course, I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm going to kill off my legacy to protect this new legacy, which is deceiving the American public.
Done. Give them every piece of evidence we collect. Our cellular analysis systems are the best in the world, and that's what the FBI does, and that's what we flew in and did. That's how we led the manhunt and got him in 33 short hours. And every single piece of video or forensic evidence or witness interview, we've done dozens and dozens, gone on these platforms, found every single person. All of that material, and I know this is frustrating to the public, and I understand it, but I'm not going to allow the Charlie Kirk prosecution to be dismantled because we want to get over our skis and publicize information. That is the one.
Oh, but you did. Oh, but you did. Just like you told Joe Rogan when you got interviewed by Joe Rogan, I'm not going to let, pamphlets and notes about Jeffrey Epstein get away and try to silence this case. But guess what? You did. Guess what? You did. You are pathologically a liar. You are a downright liar.
Thing you cannot do. We will make everything public in court. It just takes time.
It does. Yeah, it always does in these cases. Is there any possibility that other people were involved? When you talked at the White House, I sort of got a little inkling that maybe you're looking at other people.
We're looking at everyone that was there, that was online, and we're looking to refer these matters to the state prosecution authorities when there's enough evidence. But the reality is,
again, are they prosecuting George Zinn? Are they looking into that? Are they talking to people at Turning Point USA? Are they gathering the evidence? What about the camera that was behind Charlie Kirk? Where a Turning Point USA employee disassembled it immediately. As soon as Charlie Kirk got shot, they took the SD cards out of the back camera. Oh, are we going to release that evidence? No. We're not going to release any of that evidence or the CCTV footage from the campus of Tyler Robinson on the roof. Again, it just seems so crazy that they only have portions. You're talking about high security cameras at a campus, at a university that should be ongoing 24/7. Oh, but we only have a tiny portion of him jumping off the roof. That doesn't help any of our case. It doesn't prove that he assembled a rifle or had the right. It makes absolutely no sense.
again, with social media, when you have hysterical conspiracy theories filling the void, you're harming Charlie and his family and a rightful prosecution of his alleged assassin, who we have in custody, and rightly so, in my opinion. And if anyone helped him, do you think that we at this FBI are literally going to let them get away with it?
Yes. Yes. Because that's what this is. You're letting the case get away. You're letting Charlie Kirk's legacy die off for your own personal agenda. You are doing everything, Kash Patel, that you accused the previous administration of doing. That's why you're such a scumbag. That's why you're such a deliberate scumbag. The difference between you and someone like John Brennan or any of the other FBI directors is we know that they're evil. We know that they come from a background of malice lying. But Kash Patel went on to podcast after podcast, went around the social media sphere, all these conspiracy theorists, and talked about how he's going to shake things up, how he's going to turn the FBI on its head, how we're going to dismantle the deep state. He campaigned on it. Same with Dan Bongino. Never let the Epstein files get away. They told you this. They told you this repeatedly. They got into the FBI, tricked you to believe that things are going to happen, and guess what? Nothing ever changes. Why? Because the system is so massively corrupted. It's not just individuals, it's the system. It's the system that is so corroded that someone like Kash Patel would come in as some sort of champion and then stay in there as an absolute puke. And that's why he's going on to the show talking about all the conspiracy theorists out there that are, making all this information, and we're doing our work. We're gonna show people at some point in time, but we're not gonna release any information. So yes, you're trying to cover it up. Yes, you're deliberately trying to scheme people. Yes, you are covering and complicitly covering for the Charlie Kirk assassination. That's what's pissing people off. That's why it leads down to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and myself and Kim Iverson and Jimmy Dore and so many other people, James Lee. That's why it comes down to podcasters to be the investigators, because apparently the FBI cannot be barged to do any of it because the FBI is complicit. The FBI is corroded. The FBI is corrupted. And Kash Patel was not going to save it.
Standing silent in the face of growing conspiracy theories. That's what we do to shut down a faulty prosecution. That's what we do to shut down a system of justice that wants to be exploited by these same anarchists. And that's what they're doing. They're bringing it to social media. They're bringing it online for clickbait, and we're not going to take it. We don't care what you say about me or Dan Bongino or anyone in leadership at the FBI. They're just going to keep doing the work.
So all the times you were on, Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz and Theo Vaughn and Sean Ryan, all these other spots you were on, that wasn't for clickbait. That wasn't to get you elected as the FBI director. That wasn't for your own personal pleasure. When Dan Bongino had the #1 show on Rumble and talking about Epstein, was he intentionally doing it because he wanted to get to the bottom of this, or is it for clickbait? Was it because Dan Bongino won a government position, he wanted a 6-figure salary, and to screw over people? What was it? Do you actually have the intent to actually serving people and serving your audience, or are you just doing it for clickbait? Because that's what it seems like to me. And trust me, I'm not doing this show for clickbait. I'm not doing this show for ratings. You could obviously tell from the stats. But I'm doing this to get to the bottom of things. And to get to the bottom of things does jeopardize your career, does jeopardize your viewability on the algorithm, because they don't want you to find answers. They don't want the truth to be exposed, because the lies give them gratitude. The lies give them power. And that's why Kash Patel is going to go on this ballroom show, taking up the freaking suite at the plaza to do a guest host on Real America's Voice and telling people, shut the hell up. Isn't it kind of ironic? They're on a show called Real America's Voice, and Kash Patel is telling America to not have a voice. Go figure. Shut up. You're just clickbait monsters. You don't know what's going on. Trust me, I have all the information. So, this is Kash Patel just want to show people, this is from Special Officer Doofy. Great name, by the way. Saying Kash Patel is a Zionist imbecile. He was all about the Epstein transparency until he actually got into position. Yes, that was Kash Patel. And that's why I'm more furious at someone like him than someone from the Democrat or the even Republican side of things. This guy should know better. This guy should know better. Just like AOC should know better. Bernie should know better. Because they actually preached. They actually preached about what they're supposed to do and how they're going to be more transparent. And then once they got into their circle, bang. That's when all of a sudden they either got blackmailed, they got deceived, they got bribed, whatever the case may be. Maybe he's part of the Epstein network, I don't know, or honeypotted. Some people are believing. I don't know what the case is, but Kash Patel got completely complicit. And now he's towing the line for the same establishment he used to call out. So watch this little breakdown of this.
Well, the Epstein Black Book, like on day one.
On day one, roll out the Black Book.
So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past.
Well, the Epstein Black Book, like on day one.
So that is him lying to the American public. That is him constantly lying, because here we are now, and we still have not gotten any information. He allowed Congress to vote on not releasing the Epstein files once again. But this is the FBI director that claims about transparency, that campaigned on how we're going to shake things up, that, bunch of fans of the playground cannot exist within government. They cannot hold public office. We are going to hold them accountable. We are going to release this information because America deserves better. And here he is in position of power, towing the line. Because it's not about the person, it's about the system. Doesn't matter who's in office. Once they get in, they get captured. Just like we saw with the squad, just like we saw with Bernie, just like we see with all these people, even Tulsi Gabbard, who I want to still have hope for. I still want to have hope for, but when you're part of the administration that's lying about Venezuela and trying to do regime change wars, trying to bomb Iran, trying to, overthrow governments, overthrow Syria to allow an Al-Qaeda terrorist to become president, I don't have hopes for you. I don't have hopes for Tulsi. Even though she's supposed to be this, anti-warmongering, anti-regime change, a woman of color who served in combat. Like, what happened to that? What happened to that? Well, you got part of the club. Once you're in, you're in. That's what ultimately came down to that. So James Lee, who I've mentioned just in that little spew here, James Lee has done some great work when it comes to this investigation. Like I said, podcasters and content creators have done more real investigative journalism than any mainstream outlet, than the FBI, than any intelligence agency, any agency, even the police. It comes down to podcasters. It comes down to the supposed conspiracy theorists that care about clickbait. It comes down to them to actually do investigative work, because that's what happens when you've lied to us, when you manipulate us, when you deceive us, when you deprive us of actual information. People are going to have assumptions. People are going to look into themselves because they've been constantly lied to. They've realized they've been lied to. So, of course, they're not going to listen to the FBI. They're not going to listen to the mainstream outlets. They're not going to listen to the official narrative, because we know things like January 6th was a lie. We know that COVID was a lie. We know that Ukraine was a lie. We know that there was a cover-up with 9/11. There was a cover-up with the JFK assassination. There was a cover-up with the RFK assassination. We know that they've lied numerous times. We know about the lie about kidnapping Gretchen Whitmer. Remember that? The fake kidnapping of the Michigan governor that turned out to be a false flag. And January 6th and so many other things. So, of course, they're not going to listen to the FBI. they're going to start doing their own investigations. And turns out people like James Lee here have done more credible work than any administration, any office that claimed to be very transparent. So here's James Lee pointing out Google Trends reveals searches for Tyler James Robinson, N88AKG, Lucid Center. So that's the hospital that Charlie Kirk was transported to. Not the hospital that was closest to the university, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. You would think that if there was a dire emergency, if you got shot by a 30-06 and you're bleeding out from the neck, you'd be taken to the closest emergency room. You'd be taken to the place that has a trauma center. They did not do that. They took him farther away to a different hospital. Why would they do that? No one's allowed to ask questions about that. And no one's allowed to ask questions about how Tyler James Robinson was able to change clothes so quickly. He had more wardrobe changes than an SNL castmate, for God's sakes. But here, James Lee's pointing out that Google Trends, so people doing Google searches, were actually searching all these keywords prior to the assassination. So this was trending in Google searches before Charlie Kirk actually got shot, believe it or not. So here's James Lee's little breakdown of this, and it's very, very, very interesting.
Let me ask you a question. When was the first time you heard the name Tyler Robinson or the Losi Center, a Mauser 98? For me, and I assume many of you, it was in the days and weeks after Charlie Kirk's tragic assassination on September 10th. And you better believe I've been doing some Googling since then, right? Who is Tyler? What are the access points to the Losi Center rooftop? What kind of damage can a 30-06 caliber bullet do? But what if I told you somebody, maybe multiple somebodies, were searching those terms before September 10th? What do you think about that?
Before the shooting. Well, there's Washington, D.C. at 11 a.m., the day before the Charlie Kirk shooting. And you'll see here where the news finally broke that it was, in fact, Tyler James Robinson. But notice that. That's weird. That's weird.
That is weird, I gotta say. Why would anybody be searching the name Tyler James Robinson one day before he allegedly assassinated Charlie Kirk?
So that guy was pointing out that according to Google Trends, so when someone searches something into Google, it's kept on record in their trends. And this guy obviously did a breakdown of this or was able to research. And someone in Washington, D.C., was searching on Google Tyler James Robinson. He had no idea who this kid was prior to Charlie Kirk's assassination. And we still don't know a lot about this Tyler James Robinson. Other than the fact that he has three, they're identifying him with three names. Isn't it kind of interesting? The shooters always have three names. Lee Harvey Oswald, John Wilkes Booth. Just kind of suspicious, but not as crazy as that. So someone from Washington was Googling this kid before we even knew about who Tyler James Robinson is. That's kind of
the data point is just a tiny blip, but it's there. Tyler James Robinson, right? A name that nobody knew of prior to September 12th, 2 days after the shooting, when the media told us who Tyler James Robinson was, right? A supposed 22-year-old leftist who hated Charlie Kirk. So what is that little Google trend?
And by the way, there's a suspicious background with this kid. If you look at to where he went to university, he went to the Utah State, which is the other university in the area, not Utah Valley where the assassination occurred, but the other university. He was part of a CIA program that the universities, Utah Valley and Utah State, were connected and coordinating with deep state intelligence. Did you know that? I didn't know that until I did some research. Because obviously the FBI is not going to reveal that information. Of course not. Kash Patel never would ever reveal such information like that, even though it's publicly knowledgeable and accessible for people to understand. You can go look at their website. It's right on the university pages that they are complicit with the CIA, the FBI, MI6, Department of Homeland Security, involved in intelligence programs. And Tyler Robinson apparently was a student of that program until he got kicked out. So no one's concerned about that. No one's concerned about why he was part of a intelligence program prior to the Charlie Kirk assassination, and then they accused him of course, that's just all clickbait conspiracy, right?
Blip mean? Well, I did some research using Google Gemini, and they say Google Trends, what it does is normalize search interest to the region you select. The formula is search interest equals total searches in the region and time divided by total searches for the term. So when you look at things from a nationwide context, the total number of searches is enormous. The small handful of searches for Tyler James Robinson on September 9th is so tiny, a fraction of all the US searches that it gets rounded down to 0. But then when you zoom in a DC context, if you filter for the District of Columbia, the total search volume is much, much smaller. So if a few searches for Tyler James Robinson on September 9th originated in the DC area, then this handful of searches becomes a significant enough proportion of all DC searches on that day to register a value of 18 out of 100. Then it says, and this part is critical, quote, the fact that the searches are localized to DC, a city synonymous with the federal government, intelligence, national media, and political organizations, strongly shifts the interpretation away from random noise or perpetrator checking his own name from an ambiguous anomaly into a strong potential signal of pre-event institutional knowledge or activity.
So, according to that breakdown, 18 out of 100 people, or 100, I guess, IP addresses in Washington, D.C. were Google searching a 22-year-old kid in Utah. That doesn't alarm you? That doesn't add suspicion to all this? That doesn't incorporate into this investigation? Why would Washington be Google searching a random name that links to a young adult in Utah? Why would they be searching this in Washington, D.C.? And why prior to the assassination? That was supposedly on September 9th. The assassination occurred on September 10th. That's just freaky. That's freaky. So kudos to James Lee on finding that information, but also kudos to that guy who did the Google Trends search and also found this information. And a lot of people are discovering this. They're discovering that the hospital that Charlie Kirk was sent off to, not the closest one, but the farther away one, was also searched by Washington, D.C. and Israel. Why would Israel want to Google search a hospital in Utah? Why would that be part of the Google Trends searches? Well, I guess we can't ask questions about that because that leads to anti-Semitism somehow. But it is of concern, wouldn't you think? A foreign country Google searching hospitals in a foreign country in a state like Utah? You would think that's a little controversial, right? You think that would bring attention. You would think, but we're not allowed to ask these things. According to Kash Patel, according to Dan Bongino, according to the great masters of dealing with government gangsters who now became the gangsters. They became the thing that they were campaigning against. So they're absolute frauds. They are serial liars. They are just exposing themselves further and further. Here's another guy who I've really turned into when it comes to the Charlie Kirk thing. This guy, Ryan Mata, he does a lot of great work. He's an investigative kind of journalist. He does breakdowns and whatnot. And he revealed something about this. Says, in my personal opinion, the FBI is actively plotting out the best way to assassinate Tyler Robinson. So what he's suspecting is that Kash Patel wants to rush this sentencing to try to imprison this kid. And then once this kid is in prison, because he'll be in possible, maximum security in Utah, receiving the death penalty, because that's Utah State, they're going to try to shush him out. They're going to say that he's, self-deleting, that he's suicidal, which he's not. And they're going to try and go after him. They're going to try and silence out Tyler Robinson before he gets the death penalty to try to cover all this up. That's according to Ryan Mata here. And he also says, you're never going to see the CCTV footage, and you're never going to see the footage that TPUSA has. Exactly. You don't think it's concerning that the wife, the widow of Charlie Kirk, goes on to his podcast show and is giggling with former producers about all the good times they've had on the show, and she doesn't find it suspicious that the FBI is lying to them, that people attending the memorial of Charlie Kirk said they don't believe the FBI narrative, that they don't believe the official story, and now Turning Point USA has not released their data. Again, we've shown the footage that a person working at Turning Point USA grabbed the camera behind Charlie Kirk, directly behind him, as soon as he was gunned down, and took the SD card out. How is that not being investigated? How is that not a conflict of interest? You're going after and sabotaging a crime scene. How is that not being prosecuted? How has that not been investigated by someone like Kash Patel? So this is what Ryan Mata had to say about this. It's very, very intriguing.
So it's very rare that a new reporter comes out of complete left field and she's actually super based and we've never heard of her, but her work's absolute fire and she's doing interviews with people like Tucker. It's weird that those things happen all in a row, but Elizabeth Lane is one of them. She seems super based. She's not fully there on the Jews yet. She doesn't understand all of it, but we'll get her there. We're going to hold her hand because she's super based. So Elizabeth Lane says, the CIA often attributes tragedies to random scapegoats to push official narratives, serving its interest. This is likely the case with the Charlie Kirk assassination and the alleged lone shooter. I discussed this and more with CIA whistleblower Kevin Shipp in my latest interview. So this is what we're talking about. Tyler Robinson is never going to see a legit courtroom. This isn't going to be a free and fair trial. And then you see people over here talking about geolocation data and fingerprints on the roof, like we're all of a sudden just going to just eat that slop up, boys, just gobble that slop. No, we're not fucking buying it. We know Tyler Robinson ain't making it into a courtroom. We're never going to see any of the videos. The CCTV footage is never going to be shown. The FBI is most likely going to kill him, or the CIA or Mossad. They're all pretty much the same at this point. And so is anybody that's carrying water for these smucks like Jack Posobiec. So
just like how no one's asked or answered the question of how this 22-year-old got onto the roof of Utah Valley University, gunned down Charlie Kirk, assembled the rifle using a screwdriver, but then somehow disassembled and then reassembled the rifle later on in a different location without the screwdriver. Because the screwdriver was still on the roof. That's what they claim. So how do you reassemble a rifle that you disassembled with the screwdriver if you didn't have the screwdriver on hand? No one's able to answer that question. Not even, as he said, Jack Posobiec is trying to cover this up. Benny Johnson is trying to cover this up. The so-called friends of Charlie Kirk, the so-called people that cried out and boo-hoo and, oh my God, how crazy. None of them are willing to hold account to what actually happened to their so-called friend. To me, that's disgusting. This happened to one of my friends, or something happened to me, God forbid. You know, when my so-called friends, my family, would they try to cover it up? Would they try to scapegoat into a different direction? No, they would want to hold accountable to who did this and want answers. So all this seems very suspicious.
Check out this video from Elizabeth Lane. Let me know what you guys think. Think Tyler Robinson's making it to a courtroom? I don't.
And I have to ask you about Charlie Kirk. We don't know anything about it yet. I was at the hospital. We are in Utah right now as we record this. I feel like, Kevin, that we are going to see another weird kid, another Patsy. Do you think that that's coming in the future? I hope I'm wrong, but do you think that's a possibility?
I think you're right. I think there is. The CIA's modus operandi, what they use routinely and always had, even going back to 9/11 with Osama bin Laden, is that they create an act and then they select a boogeyman. And once they have identified this boogeyman, they catch the boogeyman, they take care of the boogeyman, and then the case just goes away because they caught the single person responsible. That's an old CIA playbook. I would not be surprised at all if they did that with this current shooter of Charlie Kirk. And let me say this, I was a former criminal investigator also. And if you look at Charlie Kirk's case in terms of modus opportunity and the ability to do this, and especially the motive, Charlie Kirk had come out fully. I pretty much have an expertise on the Epstein organized crime network globally. Charlie Kirk had come out courageously and exposed the Epstein case full bore to the point where he really stirred up the internet. And he also, during that particular event, was talking about the transgender attempts in the United States to take over public education and standing against that. Now, the Epstein case was a Mossad CIA operation at the highest levels of intelligence. That's why some of the files haven't come out yet, because they're being held by the CIA. But Kirk had exposed Epstein. He was standing against the transgender movement, which is part of the Epstein elite, kind of perverted, twisted movement that runs in those circles. So he was a target. And in my opinion, so far, based on what I've seen, I think that is very likely involved.
Why should we?
So that's a former CIA officer stating this. This is not some crackpot. This is not me stating this. This is not even Ryan Mata stating this. This is a former person within the CIA on camera who states that this is definitely an operation within the intelligence agency to keep this covered up. And as he stated there, that Charlie Kirk, in his final days, and we have shown this over and over again because it's important to understand final words. It's very important to figure out the motive behind the shooter. It's one thing to crack down on who exactly did it, but it's also important to know the motivation behind it. What actually caused someone to go and deliberately attack a victim like Charlie Kirk? And what we have been revealing is that Charlie Kirk was having this epiphany moment to open the door and openly state on camera that he felt worried about AIPAC. He felt worried about Israel. He was concerned about it, and he was rejecting the advances that Israel was putting placed on him. Now, again, we have stated this numerous times before. I want to state this again, that we are not saying that Israel committed to it. We are not saying that it was transgenderism. We're not saying exactly who did this. But we have to acknowledge that they are part of this investigation. We have to acknowledge that there is a lot of evidence in that direction. And that has to be part of the conversation. That has to be part of the investigation. But you have Kash Patel at the beginning of the segment there, interviewed by Real America's Voice, telling America to go shut itself because, trust me, bro, we got it. We're going to hold Tyler Robinson accused and proceed within the extent of the law, and we're going to go after him, and that's it. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to have concerns. You're not allowed to hold accountable to the information, because anyone that's doing that is clearly doing it for clickbait. According to Kash Patel, a guy who wrote a book on government gangsters, a guy who campaigned himself on being this outsider, and then once he got in, boom, he became one of them. So Kash Patel is a liar. Dan Bongino is a liar. Pam Bondi is a liar. Donald Trump is a liar. Anyone within the Trump administration using this as an opportune moment to censor, to silence, to try to use Charlie Kirk's name as a martyr for, the Israeli agenda. You are all sociopathic, degenerate liars. And to use this guy's name in vain for your agenda is absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous that you would do that. And the people that are really doing the due diligence, the people that are really actually wanting to have closure and really caring for Charlie Kirk. And again, I am someone that tends to disagree with Charlie Kirk. I don't agree with everything this man has stated over the years. But the reason I'm bringing this to attention and investigating is because, hey, what if this was me? What if this was me? Charlie Kirk was roughly the same age as I am. So what if it was me? What if it was someone else? We have known numerous times that deep state intelligence and foreign operations have tried to silence people who are opposition, who are bringing a different opinion, who are challenging the narrative, who are challenging the status quo. And they've been constantly doing it ever since. And this is another example of it, of them trying to cover it up. The only difference is we're in 2025. We have a lot more advances into cracking down on the mysterious case of who assassinated Charlie Kirk than we did in 1963. And we're able to bring more attention to this, just like the Google Trends searches have revealed. Like, why is Washington, D.C. researching a kid from Utah? Why are people in Israel searching up in a Utah hospital? Why is there so much connection with Google searches from foreign countries on Utah Valley? Why is Utah Valley and Utah State coordinating with the CIA? All these things that we know about because we have the ability of the internet, we have the ability of social media, we have the ability to share this information to people. And now the Trump administration, just like we saw with the Biden administration, is trying to coordinate themselves to becoming the censorship police. They tried it with the Biden administration. Everyone went against it. And now the same people that decry themselves as free speech warriors are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to do the same thing. So it's a big club. You and I in it. They're lying to you. They're deceiving you purposely. But luckily for us, we're not going to be silent. We're not going to be silent. This is not going to go away. And Kash Patel doing this, going on camera and telling people about conspiracy theorists, you're just adding more fuel to the fire. More people are going to have questions because you're not answering them.